Join us as we search Alaska and beyond for mysterious creatures, featuring Beans Baxter and Rob Roy Menzies. This is the Alaska Bigfoot Studies. All right, story time with Chuke. This is so weird. Talk about AI controlling our lives. I am obsessed with AI and terrified by it, but this is the new Insta360 Flow Pro 2. Came out a couple months ago, and it's using AI to track me. It's just crazy. Anyways, shout out to Avenue Cigars at this Serenity Now cigar. Serenity Now. Anyways, just wanted to kind of give you guys a State of the Union address. 2025 is turning out to be quite an intense year already. Just with all the things going on, at some point I'll do another video on UAPs and drones, but shout out to White Bread Thunder. He messaged me a couple weeks ago and he's like, man, if you're in Anchorage, look up in the sky. And I was like, oh man, and that's when there was a lot of drone sightings around the country. And, 15 minutes later, I was driving and this helicopter, it wasn't a military helicopter. It could have been police. It looked civilian, but it was barely above the treetops, just zooming right over the road. And, it could have been anything, but that tripped me out. And then for the next 2 days, I would see what I thought was just massive drones. They look like the SUV sized drones, but in any case, they were in big industrial drones, and I would get ready to film them or just catch it. And sometimes it's airplanes, but it was weird. Okay, screen shut down. Let's see. Oh, still tracking me. This thing is so crazy. Got a few topics. Ooh, sorry about that. Usually don't smoke inside. Jeez, now I know why. I just wanted to reflect on, I've been doing these for almost 2 years now, or maybe it has been 2 years, but it's been every Sunday, a Bigfoot or high strangeness related video. And I wanted to thank everyone. That was weird. This little thing just came down. For encouraging me, commenting, tuning in. Shout out to all the people out there in the Alaska community. I still have to connect with subarctic Alaskan Sasquatch at some point, but just hanging out with Beans and Rob Roy, and now the Cryptid Wilderness Research and the Freaky Deaky podcast. Those guys have just been a lot of fun and just kept me busy, just bouncing ideas off them, going on little mini expeditions. It's been great. And I'm not going to lie, when I cannot wait for spring and summer so I can go back out with Rob Roy and Beans and do some of these expeditions, because, I'm just messing around and I've already found some massive footprints that I couldn't explain and I thought were pretty cool. And we've seen a few things they've experienced even more, with stuff being thrown at them and hearing things and stuff. So I'm really excited about, I feel like I'm in the upside down land. There's these like little pieces of ash just floating in the air. Really bizarre, but I have just loved being a Bigfoot researcher. I was thinking about it. There's a few different kinds of people. There's some people that don't believe at all, and I can understand that. It's pretty outrageous idea. It is, sometimes to someone who is very factual, it may not make sense. Then there's the person that's just drawn to it, and that's where I fall in. I am, just obsessed with the idea of Bigfoot and the sense of the unknown, and just wanting to be a part of it all. And ever since I was a little kid, I have just wondered about UFOs and Bigfoot and all that kind of stuff, and really drawn to it. Don't even know how to light a cigar. Kramer here. But anyways, then there's the other person, and this this is what I find fascinating. The person that it just falls into it. And that's the person that never believed, maybe would scoff at it, and suddenly they have an encounter, and then they're just thrown into it, and they're like, okay, well, now I believe. And those are the really interesting ones, I feel. So one of the things just in my studies, God, I've learned so much just from you guys with the comments and, you know, messages and all that. I just learned a lot in the last couple of years. But one of the things that I find interesting, and I don't think you can discount it, is the actual fossils of Gigantopithecus that were found. Now, the biggest primate ever known to live, and this is not cryptid zoology, this is actual science. They found these fossils in ancient China. I don't know when it was. It was a very long time ago. I'd have to look it up, but we're talking a massive, 6-7 foot tall primate, Gigantopithecus, that a lot of these encounters could be something like that. Really big ape-like primate, also human-like. So pretty interesting. Another thing I wanted to talk about was just some of this research I've been doing. When I went camping, I got to give this back to Rob Roy, but we've got this book, Bigfoot, Wild Men and Giants. David Pallades, of course, I think they have met that guy. But I was just looking through this, and boy, a lot of East Coast stuff, but it's all this stuff from the 1800s of the wild man. Now, the New York stuff I get because I lived on a small, the Tonawanda reservation there, and they've got the wild masked man that you're not really supposed to talk about, very steeped in the culture. And then there's just all these wild man sightings, and these. So I believe in Bigfoot just because of the indigenous tribes. I mean, I was talking with this one lady, and she said, I haven't found a tribe that doesn't have a story of hairy man or wild man or Sasquatch. It's kind of, just they all do pretty much. It's rare for a tribe to not at least have knowledge of it. Pretty sure they all do. But these are just from like the just regular town folk in even in England, which is a trip, but all in the 1800s, a lot of East Coast stuff. Gorilla at Large, Pittsburgh Dispatch, September 19th, 1889, strange creature frighting the natives of southern Indiana, Eckerd, Indiana. Naked hairy creature, which from the descriptions given by reliable persons who have seen him must be a young gorilla, was seen recently by various persons in the woods and cornfields 6 miles south of here. Mrs. Kate Knight and Oscar Grant, others of the names given as eyewitnesses. Each person saw him on a different occasion, New Albany. And so there's just all these interesting things. So that is something, this is a book I am reading. And then if you haven't, go on to Alasquatch podcast. I've got the thing in my description, the website. This is Bean's podcast and website. He has written several books. I believe he's got another book coming soon. I don't want to spoil anything, but this is my favorite book. I've read the whole thing. I need to read it again. Abandoned: The History and Horror of Port Chatham, Alaska. Now, people will, some say Chatham, Port Chatham. I think he says that. Sometimes I say Port Chatham, but he actually went over there with one of the expeditions on my uncle's boat. And I remember being way out there, past Seldovia, and we were going fishing, and that's trolling for, sometimes we'll troll for winter kings in Kachemak Bay, and outside it is so fun because you get the fishing bug in the middle of January, and it's a little more warmer down in Homer, end of the Kenai Peninsula. It's kind of like Kodiak weather. You go out there, you catch a 30-pound king out in the ocean trolling. It is so fun. If you haven't experienced that, come up to Alaska in the winter. It's almost better than summer because 5% of them have this white meat. Anyways, we were in Chrome Bay pretty close to Port Chatham. And then we went by Port Chatham, and my uncle turns to me and he says, that's the, and this was years ago before I got into it a little more seriously. I was already into it then. He points at the bay as we're going by, because we're going to all these different coves and, trolling for king salmon. We go by Port Chatham, and he points at it, and he's like, yeah, that's the bay where they moved a village in ancient times because Bigfoot was killing people. And so that was my first introduction to the horror of Port Chatham. The story is interesting, but what I wanted to point out is there is an indigenous name. Just Beans did so much research on this. There is an indigenous name. Oh, now it's got to find me again. This AI is so crazy. But the story of the origins of this hairy person was, and what I believe it was similar to the horrifying story of Gabriel Fox, is the person turned into Sasquatch. It used to be a human being. It's almost like a curse or something, but they went out in the woods, in the wilderness, and turned into the hairy man. So transformed from a human being, maybe the villagers knew him, into a hairy man. What I find interesting about that is, several hundred miles to the west and, what is it? Southwest, kind of. Anyways, the Yukon-Kuskokwim area, you could say. Bethel's the hub. It is a Yupik area, and then there's all these teeny little villages out there. So my buddy Patrick lived in one of those little villages outside of Bethel for 20 years, and he has got all kinds of stories of Sasquatch, wild man, hairy man, Bigfoot. He is a believer, 100%. He believes he saw one, but he pointed me out to the Delta Discovery, which that was a gold mine of information. Google Delta Discovery hairy man. So I looked it up and I started reading all these stories. And that's where I got the stories. Well, that creature's not too nice down there too. Hairy man rips a dog in half. Hairy man, one gets shot by a hunter, and all the other hairy men follow that guy home and just harass him. But one of the stories was the legend of Gabriel Fox. Now, Gabriel Fox, he was from a actual village, and what happened is he ran away, and the legend is he was staying at a group home. He ran away into, they got a lot of swamps there. It's like tundra swamps. He ran away into the wilderness, and he transformed into a hairy man so he could survive. So he transformed into a big hairy, from a child, into a big hairy ape-like creature. And the crazy thing about this story is not something you'd expect. The government found out about him, specifically the Army. And what I find so fascinating about this, I used to be a contractor. I've seen some of these abandoned facilities. The U.S. Army used to have a huge presence, not only in Western Alaska, but all over in Alaska. They had all these bases because, there was, after World War II, before World War II, there's big push, fortify the bases, man these bases, and then the Cold War, and then we got fighter jets, and that changed everything because we could have, Fort Eielson, we could have J Bear, we could have all these bombers and fighter jets, and they're like, we can be somewhere in a matter of minutes. We've already got these, interior base, South Central base. We don't need all these other bases. We can save some money. And so some people are kind of still a little resentful in some of the villages because there was a lot of jobs. There was a lot of government jobs associated with these Army bases. They shut down, and I've seen them. Some of them are basically abandoned military bases. They just cut the budget and shut all these bases down because now we got a big Air Force. But anyways, so during the time of Gabriel Fox, there was a huge military presence in these bases, and the Army found out about Gabriel Fox, found out about this Bigfoot out there. They captured him. This is the legend. It's an urban legend. They captured him, and that's the end of the story. They're studying him. He never returned. Really interesting. And what's I find interesting when I talk to Patrick, who lived there for 20 years, like I said, he won't be interviewed by me. He won't come on camera. He loves talking to me about it, but his wife is from a local tribe and she doesn't want that kind of attention. Besides that, he said the attitude of all the people out there that he knew, that he was told was, oh yeah, the government knows about it. They don't want us to talk about it. So that's what he told me. So just fascinating. I learned so much just ever since I just start researching little stories like that. And I know I've talked about it, and it's something I love talking about. Shout out to Jomo and the kids, Interdimensional Bigfoot. I think that there are so many camps, and people will ask me, Chuke, do you think Bigfoot's a North American primate, flesh and blood, or an interdimensional creature? And the answer is yes. I believe in both, actually, because in some areas there could actually be, no doubt, a Bigfoot that is just a big, maybe it's a Gigantopithecus that survived, and God, this thing just trips me out. It survived, and it breeds. It's got a small population. They have their own language. It's just flesh and blood. It's living out there, and it is so intelligent. Who knows? Maybe it has some kind of abilities. Maybe at the very least, it's got very keen senses. It can sense humans. Very smart, and does away with the remains of the dead ones. Is able to go deep in the areas and not be found by humans. And up here, I would say that is totally possible, because I have been to some places when I took my uncle's boat, the one that took beans out on the expedition. We went from Seward through the straits all the way around to Homer. So, we went in between Kodiak and the main peninsula and into big waters where there's big storms, and it gets miserable sometimes. But his boat, the Puckuk, really cool boat, really tough ocean vessel. But we were going through those straits, the fjords, and there's nothing but, there's no beaches in some of these areas. There's cliffs that go straight up, and then just thick forest with deadfall that if you've ever done any hunting, we call it bushwhacking, where you hopefully will find a game trail, but you're just going through, and it is difficult to traverse. Especially up here, we've got this thing called Devil's Club. It is this nasty thing that's about that big around, branches out into all these thorns, and you grab one, you're screwed. You just got thorns in your hand. Those are everywhere. He says nobody can get there. That is someplace, this whole area for 100 miles, no humans have been, because you can't get there. You can't land a boat. You can't land a tail dragger unless maybe you're a float plane, and sometimes there might not be a lake for around. You might be able to land on these lakes. The only possible way that you could get to some of these areas, if you were like a special forces military team and you go by helicopter, because it's pretty cool if you read about how they do these Blackhawks. They get refueled, or they'll bring extra fuel tanks, and when they plan these missions, they know exactly how much fuel they'll have, when they'll refuel, if they're going to bring extra fuel. They can pretty much go anywhere. So they could go there, and they'd have to drop somebody down by, on a tether. Still, there are some places where, unless it was an emergency, they couldn't land. They might be able to drop somebody, but it would be very difficult. And that's the only way a human could get there, because these places are so out there. And kind of funny that area isn't too far from Port Chatham, where we have probably the most iconic Bigfoot story ever, of the Bigfoot that was not nice and was actually hurting people. And, they've moved that whole cannery. And anyways, a very interesting story. Definitely read Bean's book, because I think he moved there just so he could write this book. And done all these interviews, locals and stuff. Fascinating story, but that's the area where a North American primate could easily get away from people, and you're not going to find it because you can't even get there. Nobody can. Military, maybe. And like I said, I do think they have some knowledge. It's a theory, but I think they have some knowledge of it. So there's that. North American primate, woo factor, interdimensional. I do believe that too. There's little pockets all over North America where we've got North American primate here, maybe Northern California. Some areas, especially the tribes, when they talk about that, I do believe that there's some kind of portal going on. They have the ability to phase in and out of reality if they're not cloaking themselves. And really, I think they're going somewhere. And I always go back to Louis L'Amour's final book, The Haunted Mesa. I love that book because I lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The main character went through there. And then he was talking about these kivas. Now, these kivas, if you ever go down to the Southwest, that's the land of enchantment. Lots of weird stories there, scary stuff sometimes, but these kivas sometimes were ceremonial. But Louis L'Amour, I think he was telling us something because he talked about these round portals inside these kivas that these people would just go through the wall and they'd be in another world, another dimension. It'd take them to this world that was a giant rainforest world, kind of like, Pacific Northwest, but they're coming from the Southwest. And then there's just these other people in this world. And guess what? Giant, huge, ape-like men, Bigfoot, Sasquatch. And so he went his whole life writing Westerns. And which his Westerns were really, as a kid, I used to read his Westerns. They're good. And then at the end of his life, a little before he died, he writes this story about interdimensional portals that take you to the Bigfoot world. He had a lot of connections. I think in that book, he was trying to tell us something. So sometimes I have to walk my dog or he'll go crazy. And, I always talk about him. He's mostly a Akita dog, pretty cool. Definitely a protective dog. He's got the genes of almost identical to that of a gray wolf. And once in a while, he'll just stop and he's kind of freaked out. Now, a lot of times it's a moose, sometimes a bear, but even in town, he'll stop and he'll just be staring in the woods. And I think that these creatures can move in and out and they can be undetected even in town, edge of town. Of course, we're the big city in Alaska here. There's huge forests that you can just go into, especially on the edge of town. And, there's the bears, there's wolves. That this summer, that was a big webcam deal. These wolves were attacking a moose on the edge of town in the city limits. We've got 3 wolf packs surrounding this, 40, 50 mile square town that's also nestled to a base, a military base on the eastern end of it. So weird. Anyways, what was I saying? Oh yeah, and the reason I believe that something could be to this is I'll get a weird feeling where the dog's freaking out, I'm on edge, I'm not hearing anything, and something's out there that's got his attention, that's freaked him out. And I just think that they could come in and out, mess with us even at the edge of town. It's definitely sightings. So it's going to be a good year, 2025. We've got more expeditions planned. We're going to be doing some hopefully intense ones. We're actually going to get out and camp for like a week. I'll be doing my bear hunting, but also Bigfoot expeditions. And I told Beans about an area I want to. I was like, I'm going to be bear hunting, but we could do a Bigfoot expedition there. And he's like, I want to go with you. So hopefully that'll happen. I know people keep telling us about Eklutna. Thank you for that. That's a hot spot. Rob Roy's got all these camp spots memorized. Willow is a very hot spot. Hatcher's Pass. He's got some really cool camp spots. We're going to go do that. And I just love camping with those guys. We cook a bunch of food, and I'm obsessed with coffee. I'll make all this coffee and I'll just sit back because these guys have been involved with the Bigfoot community for years. And they know all these people in the Bigfoot community. I'll just sit back and listen to them talk shop, and it's insane. It just blows my mind. I have a lot to learn. That's why I'm reading these books that Rob Roy, recommends, but they'll just talk shop about the inner circle of, the U.S. Bigfoot community. Oh, did you hear what this guy said? You hear what this guy posted? This guy called me. This guy emailed me, and I'm just back listening to them, just like, holy, what the fuck? It is fascinating. Anyways, thanks for listening to me ramble. I love doing these. I will be traveling internationally, but I'm going to keep the videos up because there's some interesting stuff worldwide. It's just a weird phenomenon. Something is weird about it. But shout out to Alex Petikoff too. Check out his channel. He's starting to do stuff on his own and with Small Town Monsters as well. But big shout out to him because he introduced me to Rob Roy and Beans, and now we're doing all these expeditions together. But anyways, everything happens for a reason. I really appreciate you guys. This AI is really tripping me out. The robots are going to take over, Skynet. But I will see you guys next Sunday. And thank you for tuning in. And please message me any thoughts, ideas you have. Really appreciate it. It's Chuke signing out.